Hello friends, welcome back to Digitalk. In this session, I am going to cover a very critical subsystem of WebLogic server, which is called the JMS or Java Messaging Service. So this is one of the area where I have seen the multiple confused engineers, whether freshers or even with the experience of 10 to 15 years. Okay, even many of the engineers were not able to answer the simple questions that is specifically related with the JMS. Okay, and specifically when we talk about the different kind of a configurations of JMSs, and then how we do the targeting of the different kind of a JMS resources. Okay, so I have seen multiple confused engineer on this particular topic. Okay, so I have posted many JMS videos earlier as well. Okay, so I thought to create this one more interactive session as well. Okay, to clarify the doubt on the JMS. Right. So let me first begin with the introduction of JMS. What exactly is JMS? So I will cover it quickly. Okay, then I will come to the configurations, how we do the configurations and how we do the targeting of the different JMS resources. So now what exactly is the JMS? So JMS is a messaging service. So what does it mean? If you have two applications, okay, application one, okay, and then you have application second application which you can consider as application 2. Okay, now these two applications you want to communicate with each other. Okay, for that you need a communication mechanism in between, okay, which is called the JMS. Okay, so this will allow the communication between your application 1 and application 2. Okay, let me design it again. So this is your application 2. Okay, so now what we are doing with the JMS, then it clarified from the name as well, Java Messaging Service. That means it is providing the communication between two different applications. Right. Now, what is the messaging? What is the communication these applications are doing? They may be exchanging the data, right? The output of this particular application need by this application for some processing. Right, so we are in the enterprise world where we have a multiple connected applications, whether it is within the same organizations or within the outside the organizations for third-party integrations, third-party services. So all the services are talking to each other, and when we say that they are talking to each other, that means they are sharing the data with each other. Now we have a different methods of sharing the data. Okay, but specifically when we talk about the JMS, so this JMS is a asynchronous method of communication. Now what is asynchronous? The other term of the messaging is the synchronous. So synchronous is simple, where we when application A send to any message to application 2, okay, this application need the immediate response. Okay, that means for example if you are using your ATM card to withdraw the money, so if the money is getting withdrawn from your account, that need to be debited from your account immediately. Okay, and you need the response immediately at the same time, whether it is on your ATM machine or on your mobile with the help of messages, but you need the response immediately at the same time. Okay, now apart from that, you have a certain kind of applications where exactly you don't need the response immediately. Okay, you can wait for some time. For example, if you are doing any kind of a purchase on your e-commerce website, okay, then after initiating the your purchase, okay, you get a confirmation that your order has been booked. Okay, and that after that you may have to wait for some time to get the details of the delivery partners or when the order is going to be dispatched, right? So synchronous is when you book the order, you need the response immediately. Okay, your item has been booked. Now when we talk about the asynchronous, okay, where response is not needed immediately. So as I said, after booking the your e-commerce order, where you have got the confirmation immediately with the help of synchronous service, the other part can be taken care by the asynchronous service. Like for example, when the delivery partner will be assigned and when your order will be dispatched, then accordingly you will get the messages on the SMS or maybe on email, right? So that is called a asynchronous message. That means that not required the response immediately. And for that, this kind of a communication, which is called the asynchronous, we use this kind of a service which is called Java messaging service. So what will happen in that case? Whenever application A send the message to application 2, it will be first go to the JMS system, okay, and it will reside there in the JMS system, and from there it is going to deliver to application 2. Now there are a lot of pros and cons of this as well. Okay, for example, if I'm saying that your application is sending message to JMS, why not directly to application 2? So there could be a chance that your application 2 is not available, under maintenance, or maybe under some outages, right? So if this application 2 is not available, your application A 1 will not able to interact with the application 2. even for the asynchronous messages as well, where we don't need the response immediately, right? There are a lot of different kind of messages, as I said, which can be wait, okay, before getting the response. So even in this scenario, if your application 2 is down and you need the asynchronous communication, your application is still not able to send data to application 2, which is not the expected behavior. If it is not the if it is the asynchronous communication where I don't need the response immediately, then it should not depend on this application for the real time responses, but the acknowledgement, right? So what happened in that case, whenever application A1 send the message, it go to JMS, and then from there it go to application 2. So in this scenario, if your application 2 is not available, your application A1 is still able to take the orders, and which can be placed in your JMS. And when this application is up, it can pick up the message from the JMS. This is one of the major benefit of your JMS. Okay, there are a lot of other benefits, pros and cons as well, right? So now we are clear on what exactly is JMS, why we need it is the communication or exchanging the data between different applications. Okay, and this is a asynchronous method of communication. That means asynchronous method of sharing the data between different applications, right? So now what we are clear on the JMS, what exactly JMS services, and then the communication, what exactly do with the communication, we share the data, right? So let us not begin with the second part. The second part is queue and topic, the two very basic concepts of your JMS. So let me explain you what exactly queue and what exactly topic. So let me move it here, okay, and let me draw it here. So now what exactly is queue? So one thing is very clear, queue and topic are the part of JMS. That means it is taking participate in the communication between the different applications. And what we learn about JMS, it stores the messages and then it forward to the application too. So when we say that the JMS is storing the messages, okay, then it stores the messages in queue and topic, right? So now what is the difference between queue? For example, let me take an example. This is one of the queue, okay, this is queue. So whenever an application send the message, okay, and when the message is received by a queue, there will be only one receiver of that one. So what does it mean? It is very clear from the name as well, queue. The message which is coming to queue, it will be consumed by only one receiver. That means multiple receivers can't accept the messages which is coming to your queue. The reason is that you need to process that message only once. I have given you the example of the ATM. If we are withdrawing the money from the ATM, okay, so that need to be execute only once. So suppose that you are withdrawing a money and that message has been triggered to the application, okay, and now the amount has to be debited only once from your account, okay. Or if I take the other example, when you are doing, suppose you are doing the amount or doing a payment for the recharge of your mobile, okay. So if you are doing the recharge of your mobile, okay, it has to be recharged only once. For example, if you are doing a recharge of some 200 rupees, okay, and in that case what will happen, that your account will be recharged with only 200 amount. So that means, suppose that messages has come to this queue that your account has to be charged with amount of 200. So there will be only one consumer for that one, or you can say one receiver for that one, so that it is only processed once. So what will happen if you have a two receivers or two consumers for this one? It could be possibility that your mobile will be recharged twice, right? Now on the other hand, you may have a certain kind of a requirement where the messages which is coming to a particular JMS system, it has to be consumed by the multiple consumers. So in that case you need a topic. Now what will happen in that case? Whenever a message coming to a topic, it can be consumed by the multiple receivers or multiple consumers. Okay, so one of the basic example of this one is a stock application. So whenever you have a do certain kind of a trading, or you have a trading application which shows the current price of the stock on your dashboard, right? So whenever the price of a stock getting changed, it is published on a particular topic, and from this topic it is completely consumed by all of the end user, whoever is using the brokerage application, to check the current cost of your stock, right? So this price is not need to be sent to each and every client separately. So what we can do, we can publish that stock price continuously to the topic. For example, the current price of the stock is 100 rupees. So we can publish it to a topic, and then whatever the client is using that for trading purpose, okay, they all will get the current price from this particular topic. Okay, so this is the basic difference between your queue and topic, right? Where we use queue and where we use the topic. So now we have a clarity on the JMS, and apart from that, we have now got the clarity on the queues and topics. Now let us come to the actual implementation, okay, where we have a persistent store, JMS modules, sub deployment. There are multiple configurations, right? So how we create them, okay, and where exactly we target them, and what is the use of each and every. So let us first get a clarity on the persistent store and the JMS store, which is specifically related with the messaging or the messages that we receive in the JMS system, right? So let me quickly draw a small figure here. This is your application 1, okay, and this is your application 2, and in between you have the JMS, which is the messaging system, which is part of your WebLogic, right? So I can write it as a WLS. Let me drag it here. Okay, so WebLogic JMS. Okay, so we are using WebLogic JMS, right? So now we have multiple terms, as I said, with respect to the JMS. When we do this kind of a configuration for the messaging, we have a lot of resources in the WebLogic. Like we have a queue, we have a topic, we have a persistent store, we have a JMS store, JMS module. So the first part is you have to get a clarity on the what is persistent store, and second, what is JMS store, because this is specifically related with the messages that we receive in the JMS system. Okay, so very first thing is when we do the JMS, start the JMS configuration, we configure persistent store. Okay, so now what exactly is a persistent store? So what I said sometime back, queues and topic, we receive the messages in the queue and topic. So queues and topic you can refer as a logical term that we use to receive or send the messages from your application. That means if you have a queue, and suppose that your application A want to talk to your JMS system where you have your queues and topic. So how this application is going to reach to your JMS system, and where it exactly it is going to store the messages. For that you need a logical definition, right? So that logical definition we define in the WebLogic JMS. For example, queue and topic, right? But actually where your messages are going to be saved, because what I said about the messages, it could be a different kind of a data. It could be a document file, it could be a text file, it could be XML file, JSON file, right? So that means once we have a this kind of a data which needs to be stored in the JMS system before sending it to application 2, that means it is physically going to be stored somewhere in your JMS system. So where exactly it is going to be stored physically in your JMS system? It is actually in the persistent store, right? So persistent store is a physical entity, you can say, where we store all of the messages that we receive in the JMS. Right? For example, if this application is sending the message to your JMS system, so this is actually going to store the persistent store. This application is going to connect to JMS, okay, to a particular queue or topic, but when the message is received in your queue and topic, it is actually stored in the persistent store. So this is the very first configuration we do in the JMS when we start the configuration of your JMS resources. Right. So now where applications are deployed, where all the applications and configurations are deployed to our managed servers. Right, we have a managed server where everything is deployed, right? So that means if JMS resources are targeted to this managed server, and when the application is sending to message to JMS, right? So that means messages first coming to your managed server, correct? And when it is coming to your managed server where you have the JMS resources, now it is going to save in your persistent store. Okay, that means this persistent store need to target to your managed server, but you can't target this persistent store directly to your managed server. You need a one mediator for that one. Okay, this mediator is called the JMS server. Okay, so what we do in this case, we target our JMS server to the managed server, and we target this persistent store to JMS store. Now what will happen? Whenever the application is going to send the message to the JMS system, either queue or topic, okay, it has to be stored in your persistent store. Now all the resources are deployed and configured in managed server. So messages indirectly, or you can say directly, it is coming to your managed servers, and from there, depend on your queue and topic, it is going to save in your persistent store with the help of the JMS server. This is again a logical entity or logical configuration for the messages which resides between your persistent store and the managed server. Right, so this JMS server is a logical entity which we target to the managed server, and this JMS server is actually connected to your persistent store, which is the actual store for storing the messages that we receive from the application one, or you can say from the source application. Right, so now this persistent store can have a two type, okay, DB and then file system. We have a two kind of persistent stores. So what does it mean? Simple. As I said, the messages which is coming from application to a JMS system, okay, it has to be stored in your somewhere in your local system before sending it to application 2, right? So where exactly that messages are going to be stored? Either you can store it in a database, or either you can store in your file system. That means on the some directory structure which where your WebLogic is running. Okay, so you can create a directory structure and then you can assign to file system. Otherwise, you can, if you have some good enterprise database in place and you are in enterprise applications, okay, where you need the high availability and then you have a good performing database, then you can use the database file store as well. Okay, so simple. If you are using the database file store, then all the messages are going to be stored in database. If you are using the file system based persistent store, it is going to be stored in your file system. Right. So this is the initial basic configuration that we do. So this is the configuration for the standalone system. We are not talking about the JMS clustering. Right. So simple. First, we have running managed server. You have to configure a persistence store. Okay, either database based or file system based. And then you have to configure a JMS server. And during the configuration of a JMS server, you can select your persistence store which you want to create. Okay, you can create a JMS server first as well. Okay, but as I said, you have a dependency on the persistence store. So once you will create the JMS store, it will prompt you for to create the persistence store as well that time. So either you can first create the persistence store and then create a JMS server and assign this one, or otherwise you can directly create the JMS server where you will also get the option to create the persistence store. You can create there as well. But the targeting should be same. Like your JMS server will be target to managed server, and your persistence store will be target to your JMS server. Right. So now this, as I said, this is a standalone architecture. We are not talking about the JMS clustering. And one thing you have to make sure when we talk about this kind of a configuration, your JMS server will orgle target to only one and only manage server one, specifically when you have targeted queue. Okay, that means when you have a queue which is receiving the message in your system, you can target this JMS server to only one managed server. You can't target it to the multiple managed server or to multiple cluster. This is not the supported configuration, because as I said, the messages which is there in a queue has to be processed only by the one receiver or one consumer. Right? We can't make a duplicate messages. It is also called the singleton services. So that's the reason the messages which is coming to your queue, which is actually storing in your persistent store, okay, and which is getting target to a JMS server. So this JMS server you can target to only one managed server. Okay, for example, if you have a two managed server, maybe in a cluster or maybe independent servers like this one, this is 2 and this is 1. Okay, and if you will try to target this JMS server to manage server 2 as well, okay, this will not be allowed. Otherwise, what will happen? You are doing the duplicacy of your message which is storing in the queue if you are going with this configuration. Right. So you can't do target your JMS server to the multiple managed server. Okay. So this is the case where you have a backend queue for the messaging. Okay. So apart from that, we have one more concept which is called the distributed queue and distributed topic, which we use for the clustering, and that I am going to cover in the next session. Okay. So as of now, I am talking about the singleton architecture. That means non-cluster architecture where we have the queues are using. Right. So this is the very first part. Okay. Create a persistent store. Either database based or file system based, then create the JMS server and target this persistent store to a JMS server, and then target your JMS server to only one managed server. Okay, so this is the first part that is cleared, where we have done the configuration of JMS persistent store, JMS servers, two things. Now what else after that one? After that we have to go for the JMS module configuration, right? So suppose that now we are going to create the JMS module, and this is our JMS module. Okay, so now if it is our JMS module, after that what all the configurations we do? We need our queue, okay, and we need a connection factory. Simple initially, right? So you can either create your own connection factory, or you can use an inbuilt connection factory as well, okay, which is by default come with the WebLogic, right? So now when you are going to define your JMS module, so JMS module can contain the multiple configuration. For example, if you have multiple applications and each application has own queues, own topics, own connection factories, okay, so in that case what you can do, you can do the grouping of the these configurations inside your JMS module in the sub deployment, okay. But because JMS module has a scope at the cluster level, because it contains all of your resources whatever you are going to configure, okay, so in that case what you can do, you can suppose you have a cluster. Suppose that these two managed servers are in cluster, okay, this is a cluster of two managed servers, okay, or let me draw it here as well, okay. So this is managed server 1 and this is managed server 2. Let me mark it as managed server 1 and this is managed server 2, right? And now these two managed servers are in the cluster, okay. So this is a clustered managed server, okay. So now in that case what will happen, how we are going to configure the resources? I'm talking about the queue only, okay, singleton architecture without any clustering. So here what we can do, we can first create a JMS server 1, JMS server 1, and then we can create another JMS server which is called the JMS server 2. And as I said, you can't target your JMS server to multiple managed servers. Specifically when we are using the queue, you can target this to managed server 1 and you can target this to managed server 2, right? And to each JMS server what we have a related persistent store. For example, for that you have a persistent store 1, for this one you have a persistent store 2, right? So now after this configuration, we are going to create a JMS module. So don't consider this as a JMS module, let it is like this one, okay, or you can consider this as a complete JMS resources, and inside that one, let me draw it here, okay. So now here what I will do, I will consider this as a JMS module. So this is my JMS module, right? So let me, oh sorry, let me take it here. So this is my JMS module, right? So now inside the JMS module we have to create a connection factory and queue, right, for this particular JMS server. Now what I will do first, when I will configure this JMS module, inside this JMS module I will configure a queue. So okay, so for example, let me take it here. So if I am going to configure a queue, it's a Q1, okay, and related to this particular queue, let me drag it here, Q1, and for this particular queue I have a connection factory. So what exactly is a connection factory? It is very clear from the name as well. It is a connection factory which is going to create the connection. And when it is going to create the connection, for example, your application 1 is connecting to your JMS system which is in WebLogic, then this application 1, which is the source application, is going to create a connection to JMS, right, in the WebLogic. So for that one it uses this connection factory to create the connection, right? So that means whenever this application need to send a message to a JMS application, it will create the connection with the help of connection factory, which is we have defined here, okay. And once the connection factory is identified here, then it will create a session for exchanging the data. So this is the work of connection factory. So now the connection factory is just we are using to create the connection from source application to target application, okay. So there wouldn't be any one-to-one mapping like the persistent store and JMS server and between the JMS server and managed server, because this is just a common configuration that we are going to create the connection. So if you have multiple JMS module, you can easily use the same connection factory because it is just going to create the connection. So right. So in that case, this connection factory can be targeted to your cluster. And let me mark it here. Yeah, this one. So this is your connection factory. You can target it to your cluster. Right. So as I said, by why we can target it to cluster, because this is just going to create the connection between the applications, source and your JMS system. Okay, so we can directly target it to the cluster. It is clear? So now, as I said, when we create the queue is only a destination where the message is only picked by only the one receiver or one consumer, because we want a message to be processed only once. So what will happen? We need a one-to-one mapping only here, right? So this queue has to be targeted to only this particular JMS server, right? This is a one-to-one mapping. So when we define these kind of resources inside the JMS module, it asks us to create a sub deployment, right? So what we can do, we can create a sub deployment and we can group these resources together. That means this particular queue and this connection factory we can define inside a sub deployment. For example, we have given the sub deployment one, right? Now suppose that you have a JMS server 2 as well, and for example this is used by a different application. So this architecture is for application X and this for application Y, right? So now for this as well we have a queue in place, right? And for this one we have a connection factory in place. So connection factory we can combine because we have targeted to the cluster. So this queue now again need to be targeted to only the JMS server for the one-to-one mapping, right? So when we are targeting this queue to the JMS server, so what will happen? Messages will getting stored in this persistent store. So either in the database or either in the file system as we have defined, right? So now this particular sub deployment we can define as a sub deployment 2, right? So what is happening? We have a single JMS module. We have this JMS module. Let me do it again. Okay, now consider this is a JMS module. Okay, so now what we are doing here, we have created one JMS module, and inside JMS module we have created two sub deployment with a queue and connection factory, right? And this belong to two different applications, Q1 and Q2, right? So the target, now understand the target, which is most important here. So now this JMS module contain complete resources, whether it is a queue for the JMS server 1, whether it is a queue for the JMS server 2, or it is sub deployment 1, sub deployment 2. Irrespective of that, all the configurations are inside the JMS module, right? So that means we can target this JMS module to cluster again, right? So what we have learned, your persistent store is targeted to a JMS server. JMS server you can target to only one managed server. Non-clustering option I am talking about. Okay, clustering I will cover in the next session. Similarly, you have a persistent store 2 which is targeted to the JMS server 2, and this JMS server 2 targeted to managed server 1, which is a one-to-one mapping. Okay, so now here if you see, I have mentioned the cluster, right? So your managed servers are in cluster, but the targeting we have done one-to-one, right? So when you are going to target this particular JMS server, when you will get a target option, and once you click on the drop box for the target, you will see the cluster option as well along with the managed servers. If you are going to select the cluster option there, specifically once you have a queue related to your JMS servers, then it is going to error out. Okay, or even it is also possible you have two managed servers, you have first created a JMS server, okay, and then you have created a persistent store. Persistent store you have targeted to JMS server, and this JMS server you have targeted to the cluster. That is possible when you don't have the backend configurations in place. At that time it will allow you to target your JMS server to the cluster, right? But once you go for the configuration of a queue, and once you will try to target this particular sub deployment which has a Q1 to your JMS server 1, you will get the error, right? Because this JMS server is a part of a cluster and this clustering is not allowed. Okay, that clustering option is only available for the when you are going for a distributed queue and distributed topic, which I will cover in next session. So make sure when you have this kind of a one-to-one configurations without clustering, so your JMS server is targeted to manage server 1 only, your persistent store targeted to JMS server, and the backend queue is only targeted to the JMS server. There is no role of the cluster here in this kind of a configuration. So JMS module can be targeted to your cluster. Connection factory can be targeted to your cluster, which is because it is a common configuration. But when we have a queue, it can be targeted to only JMS server 1, or you can say individual JMS server. Right. So what we have learned so far, JMS, and then what is JMS, what is queue and topic, and what is the actual purpose of JMS, what kind of a communication we do with the help of JMS, then what is the role of persistent store and JMS server, and after that we completed a JMS module and then your queue topic and then connection factories. Now one important configuration, if you heard about that one, which is called the JNDI, Java Naming Directory Interface. So this JNDI is used by your application to look up for the resources. What does it mean? Let me clarify. For example, you have an application A, okay, and this application is going to connect to a particular queue. For example, this is the queue which is defined in your WebLogic JMS, and when we define the queue, we specify a JNDI name to the queue. Okay, so this name of JNDI name of a queue will be defined in your application. Whatever the name for JNDI name of your queue, it is going to be defined in your application, and that's why your application can able to reach to this particular queue, right? Because you have a multiple queues in your system, and every queue has a own JNDI name, and which queue this application has to send the message, it is defined with the help of JNDI. So simple, it is a connect, it is a lookup configuration which your application use to connect to a particular queue or topic, or maybe for distributed queue and distributed topic. Right, and this you can see in the JNDI tree of your managed server as well. Once you go to your console, you click on the managed server, and once you click on the managed server, on the right hand side you will see a hyperlink for to check see the your JNDI tree. Okay, and with the help of this JNDI you can connect with the queue for sending the message. And before that one, connection factory will come in picture, right? Because this connection factory first will create a connection between your application and your JMS system, right? And once this connection factory create a connection, then your application will send the message to this particular queue with the help of JNDI name, which is defined in the application. Right. So this is the very basics of your JMS, and but very important and critical configurations. As I said, where I have seen many engineers, even the experienced engineers, were confused. How, what kind of resources we define, where exactly we target them, and when we are going to target to the cluster, and when we are going for the queue and topic configuration, then we are getting a multiple kind of errors. So there are multiple kind of confusions are here, which I tried my best to clarify in this session. Okay, and next session I am going to cover the JMS clustering part. Thank you.